Hi, Annette.
Hi, I thought maybe I was in the wrong link. I just clicked on I got a
Nope,
notice on LinkedIn that you were live. I was like, oh no, am I in the wrong place?
nope. You're in the right place. You're in the right place. I don't have my camera on yet,
Okay.
and because we're live, and I'll always go before showtime to make sure that we land, and then if we don't land, then we do a plan B. This time I had a little small glitch. I was able to fix it. We're live. People can hear us, but they can't see us because we have our cameras off. Uh,
Okay.
but I'm gonna put mine on. You can keep yours off as long as you like until showtime. But I like to. It kind of gives a little extra edge to attract people's eyes. I don't know if you know, but when you host the live now, it shows on your homepage on LinkedIn.
I know,
So
I've heard that. Very
yeah,
cool.
so I think that's a cool feature. The other people who poo-poo it, I think it's a great thing to have. It's a great way to stand out if you dare. I'm completely comfortable with being on video now, as opposed to this time last year. It scared me to death. So, even though I've done video, I've done, you know, stuff before, but now I practically live in it. I probably have an address on LinkedIn other than my URL, uh, because I'm on it so much, twice a week at
Oh,
least.
yeah, I hear you on that. I've been so nervous to do video myself. I hate my voice, I hate my face, but you have to just get over it. And I finally did in the
Yeah.
last couple of weeks, and I've been just kind of churning out videos. People in the career space, as you know, we encourage our clients to do videos, but how can we do it if tell them if we're afraid to do it ourselves, right?
Yeah. Well, that's my thinking, but unfortunately, people don't share that perspective. They tell the clients and all that. As I've seen people say that, yeah, I write LinkedIn profiles, but you have less than 300 people following you
I
or you
know,
that you're connected to.
I know, or no background photo,
Yeah, exactly.
you
It's
know?
like how you got to be an example. You got to live it out, and that's what people respond to ultimately.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be here. This is very exciting.
Well, it is to me too, and I've been doing this September. We Damian and I do this on Fridays, and we've had our ups and downs because he's had some things go on. I had a couple of things go on, but Jack and I have only missed like one or two shows since September. So we've been at it and constant, and I think it's a good thing. It's helping folks. People are commenting. They send us little notes saying that they like and they like what they hear and heard and it's helped them. So that's why we do. That's why I do.
Well, I've
Nothing
I've
more, nothing less.
I've listened to a few of these, and also the ones you do on Wednesday.
Mhm.
And it's great, and it's great information.
Good, good. That's the most important, that we're giving it out. We don't worry about the numbers or how many people are watching and so forth. We're here for people who need the help the most. So I'm going to turn on my camera just so that the people can see me. Hey,
I
what's up
will
out
I
there?
will too. I
Okay.
will
All
too.
right.
So I hope I'm not
Fantastic.
getting too much bleed. This is a virtual background. However, these are actually my bookcases. They're just in another room.
Gotcha. Hold on a second. I need to get one thing to monitor um, LinkedIn comments. The only way I can see LinkedIn comments for because of the way that we're doing it is that I have a separate unit like my iPad to watch on LinkedIn so I can see comments. If you're watching, it's going to be another 3 minutes before showtime. We're waiting on Damian. and hopefully all is well with him. And we'll get started here. I didn't realize it was 11:57. It is, and it's that close.
I'm so excited. Oh my goodness.
Yes, yes.
Is this on a delay from here to LinkedIn? Because I'm like, oh, that's really weird.
There's like a 20-second delay,
Oh, okay.
about 20 to 30-second delay.
So I shouldn't look
Um,
at it on LinkedIn then.
well, you can look in on LinkedIn if you want for like the comments. Sometimes we get a lot of comments, sometimes we don't. So it depends. Um,
Oh my
I
goodness. I'm sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just
Like I
gonna
said,
say, I see our friend Lisa here, you know.
oh, okay, cool. Hey Lisa, how you doing?
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for being here.
Yes, we had a few comments from earlier this week. I don't know if she's actually live, but for those who are live with us, we're going to start here in 2 minutes. Go ahead and give us a shout. Tell us who you are, where you're from. Usually we have people from all over. You just never know. So this is going to be a lot of fun. And resume talk is always, even through the podcast and all, it's usually a very popular episode, and a lot of people want to get input on it. Um, Not to say that that people's behavior always shows that they think that's the only thing they need to do, but
Exactly.
it should be one of a big thing if you, especially if you're trying to make an impression the first time around.
Oh,
So
exactly. It's not a silver bullet. It's not having the most perfect, strongest, best resume in the world. It doesn't mean that, you just send that out to job boards and boom, you have a job. So
right, exactly. Yep. It gets you past a few gatekeepers. Other than that, you're on your own. And that's about as good as it gets. Unless, of course, you get the magic referral, then of course that is like the Willy Wonka golden wrapper chocolate, so to speak.
exactly.
Damian is here. At least, hey, Damian, are you there?
I'm here. I'm just
Okay,
trying to
good
get
deal.
my camera working.
Okay, good deal. Good deal. So we can go ahead.
I'm going to just adjust my camera here while
Okay, adjust your camera.
we're waiting so that I can actually be looking more at you and not up
There you go.
at my camera.
Yep, yep. So we are ready to go, and I'm glad there's a few people watching. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm gonna go ahead and begin the show by saying welcome to the Modern Job Search Checklist. My name is Mark Anthony Dyson. You can follow me at thevoiceofjobseekers.com. And right across from me, before I introduce our lovely guest, Annette Richmond, I just introduced you, but say hello to Damian Burkle, of course, the jobsearching.org. And of course, he is the founder of Professionals in Transition, which has helped more than 10,000 people over the years in the job space to help them find jobs. And welcome Annette Richmond to the show. Thank you so much. She is a master certified resume writer. She's one of 60 in the whole world. And you see all those letters, it takes a long time. If I tried to say every one of them, we'd probably be here till 12:30 before we actually start the show. But we're going to say hi, Annette. And how can people find you online? Where's your website home for us?
So my website, obviously, I'm on LinkedIn, Annette Richmond, one of many Annette Richmond on LinkedIn. And my website is Career Intelligence Resume Writing. Long, but I think easy to remember. So
Yeah, well, did you capture a URL where it just has the acronym, and then you can just
yeah, I did. I have yet to kind of set that up, but I did that recently when I got on Clubhouse and also and was looking for a short URL. But yeah, I have to do that. Good reminder.
Yeah. Well, you know, and to remind the people, Annette lives on Clubhouse as well as LinkedIn. So if you don't catch her on LinkedIn, she's on Clubhouse. You practically do like 2, 3, 4, 5 shows a week, don't you? I've seen you there like a lot.
Oh, well, I love it. I love having the interaction. It's like this LinkedIn Live where, you're actually able to, talk to people, and people here can put in questions in the chat and have them answered. And, Clubhouse
Mhm.
I find is like that too. So right now we're doing uh, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in the Smarter Career
Wow.
Moves Club. So
Mhm.
that's my club, and there's so many other great clubs and such great information to be had there as well. So
Good deal. Good deal. Well, let's begin. And I think it's very important for us to talk. We're going to talk about all things resumes. Well, at least we're going to be able to try to cover as much as we possibly can, because there is so much to cover when we talk about resumes and resume writing. One of the things that we should cover, this whole idea of how people should stand out during the pandemic. And though we've talked some on the show, Damian and I have talked some on the show, we have talked about how people are going to need to kind of give an idea how people think that employees are just looking at the pandemic. What I think ultimately employers are going to want to know is, how do you respond to crisis, and how do you respond if the bottom should fall out in the business? Would you pivot, or are you going to wait for somebody to tell you what to do? Would you say that would be a better assessment of how people should maybe address at least some part of their resume, or a small part of their resume, to what's been happening over the last year?
Um, yes, one of the things that I found, and I know other resume writers have found this as well, is sometimes we work with clients who are helping their company through, manage their business through the pandemic. For example, I worked with someone recently who had works for a business where everything was in person, and she helped the company make it an online process so they were able to maintain their business. I
Mhm.
think it's a lot of if you can show how you have helped your company, adapt during the
Mhm.
pandemic. I think that that can be very useful.
Good deal. Good deal. Damien, did you have a question to toss at Annette?
Well, I actually, I
And you have a
do.
comment as well. That helps too. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, 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 that's okay. Um, One of the other things that I recommend if you're job searching is to be able to account for your time during COVID. And one of the things that I recommend both on your LinkedIn profile and at the bottom of your resume is talk about the classes that you've taken, the certifications that you have gotten, the volunteer work that you have done, so that when you're asked how have you spent your time this past year, you can clearly show that you are a lifelong learner, a self-starter, and that you have improved, and that you are a better, stronger candidate now than however long it's been since you have been out of work. And the question that I have is, um, when you write resumes, what is the first thing that you concentrate on, Annette?
Well, first of all, can I just say that is so smart, and that is a great idea to show whenever you're not working what you're doing, so that people don't think you're just, home watching TV all day or whatever, catching
Mhm.
up on your sitcoms. Um, One of the things I think employers are nervous about when they have someone who is, out of work really for any reason, is that their skills are falling behind. So if you can show that you are, dedicated to improving your skills, your craft, whatever it is, I think that does make you a stronger candidate. As for resumes, there's kind of two things. Obviously, you want to have an ATS, friendly format, but you're really writing for the human reader. And I think the most important thing is to really show the impact that you've made on your employer, whether it's on the company wide, it could be your department or your team, where you have really uh, done something, because people in similar positions are all doing similar things. So when you have a resume that talks about managing the team or running a campaign or whatever, someone in a similar position at another company is doing the same things. And the way you stand out and sell yourself is by giving examples of things that you've done that have had the impact, and it doesn't need to be generating income, because all positions are just, that's not it for everyone. But if you're, apologies for my dogs, I'm sorry. But if you're in operations, a lot of people are doing things, they're redesigning processes or changing things around and saving time. So instead of taking someone, 3 days a month, it's now taking a 1 day a month. And so they have that extra time. So that would be my take on that.
Yeah, I think that people, it would serve people if they even just be more specific about the career development they've taken just last year instead of over a long period of time, just so that it's clear that these are the things that they've done that year. But employers are still going to want to know how you've gotten from here to there as far as your career, the span of your career and your career trajectory, and what they should be able to visualize what you will look like in that particular position. I think ultimately that needs to be a problem that they'll need to solve. And to let everybody else know that you're watching, feel free to put your resume questions in during while we're discussing and while Annette is answering questions about resumes, and we'll get to them. But I want you to be able to go ahead and start right now. Start putting in your questions and try to keep it to 2 or 3 lines, because we don't need to know every single detail, but it would help to know while I'm reading the question what the actual context is. So if you can please be considerate in that way, I appreciate it. So Annette, overall, the biggest challenges, uh, we mentioned one of them, that's been the pandemic. What are some of the biggest challenges that may be a little bit off the radar for folks that are at home, that are just kind of even just starting to write their resumes now? Because there are people who are recently laid off in the past month or so, because that's what actually happens in the first quarter, near the first quarter, after they've done the Christmas rush and they've done all those kinds of things. People are put out. So what are some of the challenges that you've seen recently that you're trying to get people over the hump?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm understanding you. If you have been laid off, I could say, and I don't know this, if you can show this on the resume, and certainly during a job interview, if
Mhm.
you're one of the last people who was laid off for some reason, I think that can really help you. That happened.
Okay,
That
that
happened to me
works.
when I was in corporate.
Mhm.
They were moving the department I worked in to Europe, moving it overseas.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons I was actually told when they did the first and second rounds of layoffs was I was not let go because I was able to adapt. I was able to be flexible and take on
Mhm.
other responsibilities. So, um, I think that can be valuable now, during COVID, but also in other times of people just showing. You're talking about adaptability and resilience and be able to be proactive. Um, Sometimes I see this where a client has had to, the person that I'm working with has had to step up and step in because their boss left, or the person that they were, replacing had not done a good job. And so they were able to step in and step up and turn things around. And I think whenever possible, I try to show that on my clients' resumes. So I hope that's an answer.
Yeah, it is an answer. And Damien, in your eyes, and have you having all types of, you've hired thousands, and you've also let go of thousands. In your estimation, if you were an employer right now, what kind of things would you just kind of spot check for when you're looking for a resume, and what kind of red flags might come up right away in looking at them?
First thing is I would look for a career summary as opposed to a job objective, because I don't know you, and honestly, I really don't care what your job objective is.
Mhm.
I'd look for a lot of white space, which improves your readability. I would look at a legible font, excuse me, no smaller than 11 font, like Calibri. Also, the death of a resume is when you have misspellings, because that's something that's easily tossed out. I'd be looking for gaps in the person's resume. I would be looking for keywords, and I would be looking for quantifiable, measurable benefits with every company along the way. And I would also assume that they would have made it through our applicant tracking system. Otherwise, I wouldn't be looking at their resume. So those are the things that I would be looking for.
Mhm. Now, being that the process has changed somewhat, and either one of you can answer this, since the process has changed a lot, where people are going through 3 or 4 rounds before they actually talk to a real live person, is the scrutiny different now than it was back at a time when you would go from applying to ATS to an actual real person? Does that affect the way that a resume needs to be positioned now, especially when people are now going through the first few rounds? They've interviewed through, whatever software the employer is using, through a video interview. And now, in other words, I'm just kind of taking apart the process a little bit to kind of understand is maybe the differences between the way we look at it in 2021 as opposed to the way we did back in 2011. Annette, you want to take a shot? Is that a clear question?
Well, yes, for sure. Back in 2011, it was often a screening interview. I was a recruiter briefly myself. I don't have, tons of experience in that area. And I was
Mhm.
contingency, and I would, find people source for the client, and do a screening interview to just get some basic information. And from there, it went to the hiring manager, who might have a phone call and might just bring somebody in. And, today, everything obviously is so virtual. My understanding, and I think Damian can offer more on this than I can, is that you're not going to be seeing anybody in person until you're, one of the final candidates. And so you really need to, prep for all of your virtual interviews as if it was face to face. You need to be ready to, sell yourself, and also, make sure it's a two-way street. Have your questions for the employer, not questions you could find on their website, but thoughtful questions. Um, but again, I think Damien can speak to this better than I can.
Yeah, Damien, what's your perspective on it?
Well, I agree with Annette with everything that she has said. And it seems like the culling process is getting more and more impersonal from the job seeker's perspective, uh, because many of the large companies now have auto interviewing, where you're interviewed by someone who isn't even there. It's software.
Yeah.
And if you have been in the workforce for a long period of time, that can be very off-putting. And it really doesn't make any difference what your age is. My daughter went through that, where she did the video interview first. Then she was asked to join 100 people, and they divided them up into 10 tables. and then they all had to do a table project, and then they each did a presentation. And from that 100 people, they took 5 people to come back for their first interview. So, it's a question of knowing your stuff, being prepared, and in many cases, being patient, because one of the things that I'm thinking is you can have the best resume in the world, you can have a great series of interviews, but with everybody scattered, hither and yon, although there is some comeback after the pandemic, the decision-making process is taking much longer. It's kind of like herding cats to get somebody to make a decision.
Yeah.
And, you just have to kind of relax. And what I say is, if you had a great series of interviews, now immediately go out and get another 3 series of great interviews to kind of cushion yourself and, not get extremely impatient because of the extended period of time that it's taking to actually land the job, if you do land the job.
Yeah, let's get into some really practical resume stuff here, because we got a question from Karina Hahn. Thank you very much for joining us. It said, I'm in HR with experience in talent acquisition, benefits, and contingent workforce. I am transitioning from healthcare into tech. How do I create bullet points that show my personality? That's an interesting question. Let's go for it. And that was your thoughts on
Yeah, that is an interesting question. It's kind of a stumper too. So here's what I would recommend. When you are transitioning like that, of course, you want to focus on things that are relevant to your target position. So you want to show how your experience works for the next position. People have thought for years in the past that a resume was an employment history. I did this, I did that, I did this. But today it's really more of a marketing tool where you are, showing your best self and focusing on the skills, achievements that you are that you want to do in your next position. So whatever it is that you're doing now that's going to be relevant in your target position, that you should focus on those things. So, focus on what you want to do and not what you don't want to do, and what is going to be relevant. So, I hope that's enough of an answer.
Yeah, I think that is a good answer. And I think presentation is everything, isn't it, Damian?
It is. And if I could just circle back very quickly, and I agree with what Annette is saying. And I often say to people, if you're making a transition, put on a pair of glasses that only talks about the information technology audience, because they're not really going to care that much what you did before that. And if you can go through your entire resume and reinterpret it towards the new audience that you're going towards, it's the same you've just kind of reinterpreted you to meet the new area of expertise that you're heading toward, just like Annette said. Coming back to you, Mark, appearance is everything. I know on Annette's website, she talks about the tremendous amount of resumes she's seen that are like 9 font, New Times Roman, that are absolutely impossible to read. And when it comes to resume writing, 2 things. One, more is really less. Less is really more.
Mm-hmm.
And number 2, it doesn't have to be a 1-page resume, especially if you've been in the workforce for 15 years or more. You can't
Or even
do yourself
10 years.
Sure, even 10,
Yeah.
the way that people are changing jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you try to squeeze everything onto 1 page, you're really shorting yourself of, all the great things that you've done. And OPS, if you're going to be going through applicant tracking system, there is no software out there that goes, no, only 1 page.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing it that way, by making it more readable. Like Annette says, you're writing it so that you have keywords to get you through the applicant tracking system, but you're developing it from a look standpoint with the idea that a real human is going to see it and read it.
Yeah, I was curious. Two things I thought of. One is that Karina's question was actually broad, even though we talked specifically about the bullet points and how to position them. But when you say tech, I guess a couple of things. One, are you talking about going to a tech company and playing in those roles, or actually are you going? Karina, maybe you can clarify. Is that you're going from healthcare to tech, which for a lot of people, that's a big jump because healthcare is known to be, in many healthcare sectors, they're very far behind in technology. So you would almost have to in some cases, you may have to overcompensate, but I guess it depends on the role. Do you want to show yourself, maybe, Annette, you can answer this. Do you want to show yourself just being familiar with technology? I mean, with the information that we have right now, or do you want to show that you have some savviness and kind of position your bullet points so that it shows some way of being savvy? Because you wouldn't necessarily have, as Damian talked about, quantifiable accomplishments and results, perhaps in many cases, unless you can talk about proficiency, which you have to talk about being tested and or gone for a certification and gotten a score back. Your thoughts on that, Annette?
So, I agree with you. And, one of the things that was mentioned was talent acquisition. So if you're doing talent acquisition, when you talk about the ways that you, acquire talent in the first place, building the pipeline, how you interview, it might be helping your company focus on, D&I or whatever that is, that would be relevant also at a tech company. But to speak to what you're saying is, the tech company may have more modern, software or something that they're using, in that process. So if you have knowledge of that, you can certainly speak to that, maybe in the summary, maybe show if you've done some courses, has some kind of a certification. I know that there are different softwares that different HR departments use, but it's also to do the research on the company. So, if you want to work in tech, maybe pick 5 or 10 or 15 companies that you'd like to work for and study them and see what they're doing. I recently saw a survey talking about HES systems, and it was, the top 20 survey HES systems that are used by most employers. And it has companies, and the survey was done by looking at the employer's website. So if you can find out, from their website what they're using and speak to that, I would think that that could be helpful.
Yeah, Damien, you would know this as well, that, as a hiring manager, you're also considering how much information, how much research this person has actually done on my company to know that at least you're clear about what position they're applying for, and not just to say that they want to switch from healthcare to tech, but they're very specific as to what position, and some things that are on the resume that indicates that, yes, this person has done some research about my company, not just the tech industry itself.
Yes, and that's another great advantage of having a robust LinkedIn profile and having a curated LinkedIn community, because if you're going to switch into information technology, and assuming that you want to stay in human resources when you get into information technology, there are lots of people out there that you could invite into your LinkedIn community and start talking to them about the companies, whether they work for them currently or whether they've worked for them in the past. And that is another way to add to reading all of their news releases and, going through their website and going to Glassdoor and, getting a kind of a full perspective of what they're all about. But if I could, I do want to go back to one thing. In her question, didn't she say, how do I show my personality?
Yes, and I think that I was heading in that direction. The bullet points that show my personality. Now, the first thing I thought was that, oh, great, somebody actually wants to stand out. But at the same time, how much can you stand out when most resumes these days are like they're more condensed, they're brief, but they're branded. But how much personality can one show through a bullet point or two that would not be egregious, not be overstated? Annette, go ahead.
So what I would say to that, and I hear that. So one of the ways you can show your personality is by how you do things. So let's say that you might talk about, building consensus between different parties that shows you having those communication abilities. If you want to talk about, leading a team or getting buy-in, and building things together. One thing that I do add, although you don't want to be heavy on adjectives in that summary statement, on the top, I often choose a couple of words that my clients have given me. I use worksheets, or they've mentioned to me what they want to show, and I've added things like lifelong learner, always curious, and loves a challenge, and things like that. Just a few to add some personality there. Uh, but I think when you show yourself being proactive, so that will show that that's your personality. I am one of those people that when I was working in corporate, I would go into a company and I would look for how can things be better. Some companies are, things aren't broke, don't fix them. I worked for one of those companies. I was not the last one in. I was the first one gone when they decided to downsize. And it was good for me because I was just not a good fit for them. So if you can show, if that's your personality, if you can talk about, something that stands out in my mind is someone who said that the company was moving in a new direction. So they took it upon themselves to go out and study and learn about this and bring it into the department and, have this implemented. So while that's not, I don't know if it's exactly personality, I think it really does show who you are. And I agree with Damian. It's a lot of it is about the LinkedIn profile. And, the LinkedIn profiles so often are these boring, bio type of, about sections, and that say nothing about you. And I know it has helped some of my clients. I see other people using this technique is, tell your story. How did you start in your in your career? What brings you joy? What, things like that. It not only shows personality as it makes you memorable. So when recruiters are looking at, 50 different candidates on LinkedIn, they remember, oh, that's that person who their sister got the computer for their birthday. And, that's how they started their love of software because they were the one playing with the computer. And that's something that's memorable. That's actually one of my clients, which is why I remember that.
Mm. Yeah, Damian, go ahead.
Uh, what I was going to say is another way to show your personality is through your bullet points. And when you have a quantifiable, measurable benefit, that's a challenge. You want them to ask you how you increase sales by 50% in 6 months or whatever it is. And each time that you put a bullet point down, there's a story behind that bullet point. And I would encourage everyone out there to, look at their resume, look at their bullet points, make sure that each of them are quantifiable, measurable benefits that they brought to the company. And as I said earlier, if you're making a switch, look through the eyeglasses of whatever the new industry is and reinterpret your bullet points, but rank them in order of importance and make sure that you have a story attached to it. Because what I might hype about my career, and I have a very good friend who was doing the same thing at the same time, the things that he put down on his resume were different because his personality was different also. So there are, between LinkedIn and between your resume, properly phrased and constructed, you can communicate personality and at the same time get the interest of whoever the reader is, enough to be called to action and invite you in so that they can learn more about you in person.
Those are great answers. And I think one of the things that people often get in the habit of doing, and I think people revert when it comes to times like these where the actual, it's a challenge to apply for jobs, especially when the hiring is a little bit slow, is picked up. But still, in some industries, it's going to be slower than others. But people tend to rely on the very basic things that they learned at first when they don't know what to do, instead of researching and asking people and asking questions and asking people like us, what should I do? How should my resume look? Instead, they look toward other people, examples that are out there, and there are millions of examples now of resumes, and they want to copy it when actually, especially when you want to make a very quick impression, and especially if you want to go through the ATS, you've got to speak to your own experiences and make them come to life for other people who read. And maybe you can talk a little bit how important that is, especially that first, as they say, the first 20% of your resume should have an impact on the reader that makes them read the rest of the 80%.
Oh, definitely. Sometimes people, they want to put everything in the resume, and
Mhm.
I agree. More is not always better. More is sometimes just more, and it's
Yeah.
not needed. Um, but it's important to, yes, you want to, grab their attention immediately. Uh, I still remember reading a newspaper and it was above the fold. You want to think of your resume that way. At the top, I agree, starting with a brief summary, which is kind of a snapshot, of what you have to offer. You just have to make sure that, if you're claiming something in that summary that, you've transformed the company, or, you have a history of transforming companies, you need to have the evidence in your resume. So you need to have something there backing that up. One thing that I recommend is to put some career highlights at the top. And those can be from your current position. They might be if you have something that you did, maybe even a job ago, maybe 2 jobs ago, if it was really important. You can include that. And, also, I agree, you need to have those bullets and you should put them in order of importance, but you also want to have them addressing different things.
Mhm.
So one might be showing your leadership, one might be, I don't know, showing operations, and to show those different things in the bullets. So, they're not all the same. And, I just want to add on to what you said about the story. Um, you may have increased, beat your quota by, been 125% of your quota, but is that because you are going to a new area of town and selling people, or is it because you just have the product everybody wants? So, there is, there's so much to tell on a resume. It's just, making sure that you're writing it tight, or, writers call it writing it tight, that you just want to keep things sort of succinct.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and to also maybe state the obvious, or maybe not. I think some people hear the word accomplishments, maybe they've gone to thought, but you've got to think of accomplishments that matter to the specific employer, not that you're putting accomplishments thing that you've won contests and that you got eighth place trophies, uh, which don't matter. You can say it's an accomplishment, but an eighth place trophy in calligraphy probably won't matter much to an employer, especially if you're applying to big tech. And I'm not trying to make fun of Karina, but I'm just trying to get people to avoid to hear things and say, oh, I've got to include it without being thoughtful about the particular reader that's going to be reading the resume. Your thoughts on that, Damian?
Um, what I lost my train of thought. What was the last thing we talked about? I'm sorry.
We were just talking about. Annette was just saying that it's important for the compliments, the accomplishments. She was agreeing with you with the less is more
Yes,
is a thing that you want to write it tight. You want to be specific as possible instead of being a generalist. You want to now start targeting the needs of the employers. Ultimately, is what you were saying, Annette. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And can I just add one thing?
Sure.
Damian's talking about looking through the eyes, of the recruiter and the
Mhm.
employer. And, I love the phrase, what's in it for me? And when you're putting
Mhm.
your resume together, think of it from the same position of the employer looking at it, saying, what's in it for me? So,
Yes, the girl likes balloons instead of flowers. If that helps along a little bit along, you got to know what that employer wants in order to meet that need, and it starts with the resume that gives them a clue that yes, you're trying to meet their need and not somebody else's.
I remember what I was going to say.
Okay,
Sorry for that.
not a problem.
When I was first learning how to write problem, action, result statements across a wide range of careers, I was always taught to ask one question, and that is, so what?
Mhm.
You increase sales, so what? By how much? By what percent? Or what have you? Because if you say increase sales, that just kind of falls flat. But if you say, ask yourself, so what does that mean? And you say increase sales by 50% in 6 months, now you have something that an employer is interested in. And I, work with a candidate and we go, accomplishment by accomplishment. And I ask that question. So what, how much, how many, by what percent, so that you take a kind of flat accomplishment and breathe life into it. And, like Annette said, answer the question. So what's in it for me?
Hmm. Yes, I like Ashley Watkins. Annette, you probably know Ashley.
I
Uh,
do. Yes.
she was very specific when we were on the podcast a few months ago about the process of being able to write a sentence succinctly, and how important that is for the reader and what that really means and being specific. But you can't be as succinct as you want if you don't have the intel that goes into writing that statement. In other words, the aspect of having to research a company and being clear on what you're looking for when you do your research. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I know Ashley pretty well. Actually, she's lovely and smart too, of course.
Hmm.
So, um, you know, it is a matter of knowing the company, researching the company, but also reading between the lines of the job application. If you're looking at a job description, what are they really looking for? If they're looking for someone to increase I don't know, the customer base or something like that.
Hmm.
Perhaps their pain point is that um, they're losing customers maybe, or, there's some reason, perhaps there's a lack in customer support. So they're losing people that way. So, to try to think of, what the pain point might be, in trying to address that, and again, the more about the company, the better off you are. But also, to a point that you mentioned when we first got on, is the referral.
Mhm.
A referral is your best opportunity to get in front of the hiring manager, to understand what the company's going through, the inside track, to learn about, the company culture. Is it a good fit for you? And also to help you know, because as was mentioned, the employer's on a different timeline than you are. You're eager to get the job. The hiring manager is juggling their job, and hiring people is just another something else they have to do. So,
Mhm.
so remembering that, but the referral is so important. And that's why, one last thing I like to add is, when you're telling your friends and family that you're looking for a job, don't say, keep your eyes open for me. I hear that all the time. I'm sure you do too. I'm looking for a
Yes.
job. Keep your eyes open. Okay, keep my eyes open for what? I'm looking for a job as director of marketing in a mid-sized technology firm.
Mhm.
And I think that can be helpful.
Yeah. And Damien, in your point of view, when it comes to bullet points, and we're probably, again, getting to a little bit more of the semantics of the resume, uh, w- w- is it pleasing to see like 3 or 4 bullet points? I know a lot of people like to use, I've seen two different things, and having written a bunch of them myself, uh, but seeing some lately, a lot of people just go right to the bullet points after they list their company, how long they've been there, and that, that first line and in the description. I've seen up to 7 or 8, even 10 bullet points per job. Um, is there value in that, or is it value that, again, less is more?
Well, I think less is more. And the other thing is, um, it's almost like an inverted triangle from the
Mm,
standpoint of, you want to put, just like we were saying before about that 20% above the fold. You want to start out at the top in your most recent position, 6 bullet points max, and then you take it down from there. And
mm,
the other thing is by the time you get deep in your career, you summarize. There was one situation where I got promoted 7 times in 7 years, and it was just a line item to show the time
mm.
that I was there. So less is more, and you want to really make your greatest impact with your career summary, your the keywords that you have, and your latest greatest job followed by your next job, and then reduce it from there. Otherwise, you could end up with a 3-page uh, resume, which is like, whoa, way too much, way too much. So,
Right,
and
right.
and I
Go
was going to
ahead.
say two more things.
Mhm.
One, it could be overwhelming, and two, in my experience, after everybody's hard work, if a HR manager spends 8 to 10 seconds skimming your resume, that's a lot of time. And if you have the top right, correct, if you can slow them down enough for them to just even pause for a minute and think, the chances of them continuing on is much greater than if not. And like I said earlier, a job objective is like immediate turn off. Um, so that's kind of my feeling on bullet points.
Wow, there's a couple of things that are in there that I think we need to talk about. And I think it speaks to some of the people who have been with their companies for more than 10 years or so, being that maybe they have been the lucky one like you were, and being promoted 7 times within a job. Now, a strategy once upon a time that I used to use, and you could tell me I was right or wrong. I've seen it work, and I've seen others it just went to the abyss. Is that I listed each, if I was promoted, like I think the most I've been promoted in the job might have been 2 or 3 times, not 7. But someone who might have been with the company who's been promoted a whole bunch of times, is it better for to position it as if it were like each job, in a sense that they each position and maybe have 2 or 3 bullet points under that, or should they try to make it all fit under one company, that they've been there for 10 years and just list the jobs? I mean, I think that's kind of a conundrum, and I've seen it work both ways. Is that clear, Annette? Am I making sense? They've had one company, they've had several
Mhm.
positions, and I know I've seen it and been and had discussions about doing both ways, still listed as one job, but also the people who think that and I thought, and I did, list it as 7 separate jobs, if I've been there more than 10 years. And really, after that, people really don't care what happens before the 10 or 15 years that you've been with the company. Is that a good assumption?
I I agree with you. People do sometimes they kind of want to glom everything onto their most recent positions. Sometimes I think it's because the most recent position is the highest position,
Hmm.
and maybe it people think that maybe that looks good. I don't advise that. I don't know any of my sort of colleagues who do. For a couple of reasons. Employers want to see, the chronology.
Hmm.
Being at a company for 10 years isn't, a bad thing. Even if it's 15 years, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not so great if you're just in that same position. So
Right.
the idea also, if you say you've been promoted 3 times, and again, I agree with Damian. You talk about it like this. I talk about it as a funnel. It's the same thing.
Mhm.
Uh,
Hmm.
you want to spend most time on the current or most recent position, but if you have 3 times being promoted, you have 2 times at least to say you're promoted. You
Yeah.
know, your first time there, maybe you were recruited to do blah blah blah, and then you were promoted to do blah blah blah, and so it shows kind of like a career momentum.
Yes.
Um, and when you show the importance of those bullets of the achievements, accomplishments, results, is to show why you were promoted. I think the days of people getting promoted because their butt was in the chair for so many years are kind of over.
Yeah.
And that's part of showing the achievements, but then again, as Damien said, less every time.
Hmm.
So many for the current, fewer for the one before that, and maybe none for the one before that. uh,
Right.
but that's my take on that.
Yeah, I feel like at times people, they cheat themselves out of telling the plot of the story, so to speak. That there is an antagonist and there is a protagonist, and of course, you want to be the protagonist of your story, and a lot of times, it's not always just being promoted. I like the word appointed. If you could be appointed, that even speaks louder to saying that that position was yours from the get-go. But I think it's happened to people, they don't take advantage of that part of the story. And for Damien, if you saw that on an application, or you saw that on a resume rather, somebody being promoted, they were appointed, they were considered, it was special appointed, those kind of uh words that describe what actually happened to you, that makes a world difference than an average resume where you see it all crammed in and it really doesn't give the crux of the story.
Absolutely. And usually what I do, especially with people that have worked at a company, 10, 15 years, is I'll do like a very brief summary of the company. And
Mhm.
then I'll span the entire time that they were there. And then I'll do an insert and do each position and the number of years that they were in each of those different positions, so that the person can get an idea of, maybe one or two bullet points under each of the positions, so that it shows longevity, it shows ability, it shows the fact that, they know their stuff, they get to a level, they go again, they get there, they go again. And it really is a strong story, because basically it tells the employer, I am a lifelong learner, I am an overachiever, and that I master skills in a position in a relatively short amount of time, and I'm ready to go to the next level. And like you were saying, Mark, if you don't do that, you are denying yourself a phenomenal story. And if it's been your last position or the position before, even as you get deeper into your resume, if you have to summarize more towards the very beginning of your career, fine, but go and tell the strong story, so that your person who's reading your resume will pause and look and say, that person's got it. Makes sense for us to talk to him.
Right,
Or
right.
her.
Right. Here's Karina followed up with a question. She says, do you think it's helpful to get a certification from Stanford in order to stand out? My automatic answer is that's kind of hard to say. I understand that the school may be prominent. They may even be prominent in tech, because if you're at Stanford, you're in California, you're in the Simi Valley. You're running across people who live and work and breathe in Simi Valley. I get that part of it, but really, you have to kind of still know what my feeling is, and having done a bunch of hiring myself, is that if you don't know what the employee needs, you're guessing that the certification is going to be enough to stand out, instead of knowing exactly what the employer needs and what certifications that would impress them and think that you would do the job. And I think that speaks to a large amount of people, is that now in our messages, even as career professionals, we telling people to get certifications to do the professional development, but sometimes a lot of people forget the line, including me, is that do it for the industry and employer. And what matters to them, is we kind of stated before. So your thoughts on Karina's certification from Stanford question?
Annette?
Um, if it's relevant, to
Relevancy is big.
I'm sorry.
Relevancy is big.
Yes, if it's relevant, and also recent is always great. One thing that I have added, and I think is a good idea, if you have a professional development section, and you have certifications or some excuse me, a professional development training you've done, if you're doing a certification or a professional development, and it's not just a seminar, but maybe it's a 6-week program, or sometimes people are doing a 6-month program. You can put the certification or the program, and then just underneath, very briefly in brackets, that this was a 6-month program. And in my opinion, that makes it carry a little bit more weight, because we all know there's some things, you go for professional development, you're watching an online, video for 3 hours, and boom, that's it. And sometimes it actually involves, coursework and things like that. So, not to go on and on about that on a resume, because, resume real estate, you have to think of it as real estate, and you have to, it's valuable space. I go with 2 pages, but you don't want to be running on, forever. So I think it's the relevancy, and if mention something that's important.
And maybe we get geeky with this. We're going to go over a little bit. Is that okay with you guys? Are you guys cool with going over a little bit more? Because I think this is an important area, and I'm going to relate this back to my personal training days. When there's a difference between getting certification from a program that could be done online for $50, as
Right.
opposed to a certification that you can get that you've done the work, that you paid $600-700 for, that you did a test, they scored it, they gave you accuracy and feedback. And all that to say is that I think there might be an underlining where people are getting certifications and might try the YouTube version as opposed to the paid version. And I think there's a difference because in certifications and accreditations, you get credit for credit hours. If you've taken a 4-hour class, you get 4 credit hours more than likely. Or if you've taken 3.5 hours, you get 3.5 hours credit. If you've done 20 hours on YouTube, that might equal to that 4 hours. But to the employer, they're thinking, well, the feedback isn't there from the YouTube channel. So therefore, you need to put something. And Damon, you could talk a little bit on how maybe employers, if it matters to them in discerning what may matter to them and why and how it's important to them.
As an employer, I have a hole in my organization, a hole that
Mhm.
I need to fill as quickly as possible with the most qualified candidate. And as you go through the resume, you go through the cover letter, you go through the interview, the real question is, are you the answer to my needs? Do
Mhm.
you have the things that I have specifically put into a job description? Are you qualified? Can you do this? Will you fit within our culture? All of that first. And then when you get down to the very bottom, it's impressive, but it isn't necessarily a deal breaker. And although uh, a course or certification from Stanford is impressive, what my concern would be cost. You know, if you're not working and you don't have money coming in, I would save my money and wait till I got employed and then have the employer pay for whatever the particular classes are. And you might be surprised that it had nothing to do with what you were thinking about paying for. And although it's great knowledge, it's not the differentiating factor that takes you over the transom and into the job.
Well, part of the caveat is that a lot of employers don't pay for classes that much anymore. I mean, they don't unless it's tech. They probably would, but a
Mhm.
lot of industries, your career is your own dime and cost now. And as we go into the virtual world, you had the skills for now, but the skills for later requires professional development, and that cost is going to be your dime. And I think some employers don't care how you learned it, but then it gets to now, can you prove what you learned, and that you're competent? There's a couple of questions I want to ask you in that. One is, you probably remember once upon a time that people used to put, and they still do, they put like core competencies like at the top, near the top of the resume. And I think a lot of people do because they're still going off of 2013 type of resume, or before that, where they did it because of the keywords. They thought that the keywords, they'll score better in the ATS of the keywords. Now, I think you put at the top, you've got to also show applied knowledge. So how do you, is there a science that maybe you use or a strategy you use to determine if you need to use that section, or maybe you just need to show it, show how you applied that knowledge with the company that you work for, to get the accomplishments, because that's part of the story too, right?
Yeah, so I actually do both.
Mm-hmm.
I do generally include core competencies, or leadership skills or things like that on
Mm-hmm.
resumes. But you have to limit them. You don't want to have every single thing you can possibly do. These are going to be your core competencies.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason that I do that is because, as you say, people are scanning We're all familiar with the Ladders has done a couple of studies where they put the, the eyewear software, and, the
Mhm.
people are actually scanning maybe a couple of times before they actually read the resume. So yes, I agree with it, for keywords, does can maybe help with the ATS, but also for the human reader. And one of the things I think about the human reader is I got a job like this myself when I was in corporate. The HR associate was given a pile of resumes and the job description and said, pick 5 people that we should interview. So the reader, may not be someone who is as familiar, with the position as, the hiring manager. And so I think it can help with that, um, making you, stand out. But then again, not overloading with those keywords.
Yeah, and I think that's what I see. A lot of people will have 13 core competencies. There's almost no way that you're going to be able to prove all of those within your resume, especially if they're ones that have that's necessary for the employer. In other words, that section should be just a wild guess of things that you think that may look good on a resume because they've looked good in the past. Your past isn't your present job always. So you're going to need to be a little bit more thoughtful about that. Damian, your thoughts?
Um, what I was going to do is actually flip my time and uh, ask Annette to talk a little bit about the resume that she's developed that also includes a chart in it, and the chart and the ATS. Can you
Okay.
share it? Because I thought that was wonderful.
Okay.
Oh, okay, great. So yes, to go through and discuss briefly ATS. Um, you have to make sure with the ATS that, the resume is, ATS compatible, friendly, whatever. There's a bunch of ways to say that. And if you are using something like a chart, you can put an Excel chart in your resume, or you want to use a text box in your resume. Sometimes people want to use text boxes because it helps with the alignment and it looks kind of pretty on there, uh, and word art and things like that. You can do that, but you have to remember 2 things. The first thing is, if you have a text box or you have a chart or something, you need to turn it into an image. And the reason you do that is because when it runs through the ATS system, the ATS system just glosses over it and it doesn't see it. So when you, so it's not going to affect the ATS compatibility in a negative way. However, you also need to make sure that you include that information in the body of your resume. So for example, if you have a nice chart, that shows the sales and all this, cool stuff that you've done, because it's a great visual, you have to have something, I like to put bullets next to it with that information in it. So, when it goes through the ATS system, the ATS does not read the chart, but the information is still there. So, again, if you want to put a quote from someone, turn that into use a text box, turn it into an image, but realize it's not going to show in the ATS system. So, visuals, I think help a resume stand out from the others on the desk, but always make sure it's ATS friendly. And I think what you may be mentioning, Damian, is the idea of putting it in a text box. So one thing you want to do after you've written your resume, or even if you've had a professional writer write it and you're unsure, you just copy that resume, all the content, and paste it in a text box. And if what's in the text box is what the ATS system is going to see. So
Great. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that was a good question, Davey. I think that was very helpful. One of the challenges that people often have to in writing it overall, and I, I don't want to make light of it because there are people who really do struggle with commas and grammar errors and all of that. Um, and I've seen both ways. I've seen terrible resumes from people that get hired because, of course, they had the other parts of the referral interview part on in a great way. But for a lot of people, they don't have that opportunity. For a lot of resume writers, they use teams. They have somebody that actually writes, and they have somebody who researches, and then somebody who's proficient to the T in proofreading, to where most job seekers actually just have themselves and maybe a sister or a brother or a sibling or a spouse to proofread. And it's not, even though there might be some perfection to some ends, a lot of other areas may not be to that type of proficiency. And I'm not trying to sell resume services, because a lot of them do have that full house, and there are those that don't. But how can job seekers, what are some tricks of the trade in that, for the solo person that's writing their own resume and pretty much has to have the last say what stays in and what is kept out?
Okay, that is an excellent point. Even some solopreneurs like me do use a professional proofreader. I use one because she's better than I am. However, I will give you a couple of tips from when I used to be a magazine writer before I was a
Mhm.
resume writer.
Mhm.
So you can use something, Grammarly is something that you
Yeah.
can use. I don't think it's that expensive. I'm not sure. I pay for it yearly, but I just don't remember.
Mhm.
You can also uh, read your resume backwards. So when our eyes read, especially if you've written it yourself, you read what your mind knows is there. But if
Mhm.
you read your resume backwards, um, you will pick out, there, THEIR instead of THERE, or words like that that might be misused. Where, if you're spelling manager wrong and you're spelling it as manger, Word isn't going to pick that up as a spelling error. But as you read it backwards, you will. So, that's something we used to do at a very small publication.
Yeah, I use Allison Doyle once upon a time hit me to editor. That's Editorr.
Oh,
And you
Okay.
up, and what you do is you have to use your laptop to upload it to their software. There is a fee, and it's a fee per word. But what they do is they actually have a person who actually proofreads and sends it back with copies with it, with what's crossed out, so you can accept what you want out of it in a Word document, and they'll send a perfect version where there is where that is likely 99 to 100% error free. But having said that, that still doesn't compensate for the content that's in it, because they're just going to proofread what is there. They're not going to tell you there's a spot missing, or there might be a question with this particular line, which you might want to have somebody else even get involved to help you with the context that you present. But at the same time, I think job seekers, and those of us who are mere mortals, we we don't see those things, nor are we objective about our own experiences the first or second time around. That maybe we can get the grammar right, but the context may be incorrect, and that can make all the difference in the world. And you probably had a lot of experience with that yourself, Damian.
yeah, absolutely. Uh, I use Grammarly, and I do read backwards, because that is a quick way to make something stand out like a sore thumb. And I do have another person that reviews, uh, because grammar, I'll just say it nicely, is really not my strength.
Mhm.
And I can get it on paper, I can get it you know, as punctualized, try that 3 times, as I can, and then I'll take it to somebody else that will, you know, dust it off, clean it up, polish it, and return it. Because you know, a second person who is not an expert proofreading your work will see things that you just won't see, because you're a human being, and you know, your brain makes connections because you did the document that another person won't see.
Yeah.
And that's the way to go.
Yeah, I really do. And writing articles for myself, I probably go the extra mile in using Grammarly or Editor. As I mentioned, I've even used one called Intelligent Writing. I think it was at one particular point, wasn't as effective as Grammarly in my finding, but I hire editor as well, and it costs. But you know, for me, writing for writing for like Glassdoor and the balanced careers, it's important to have somebody edit before it gets to the editor, because they look for different things. But having said that, I think that's where again we go back to understanding what the employer wants. The employer also wants to see a flow, that it has a flow to your writing. I'm afraid editor and Grammarly, editor can help with the flow. Grammarly doesn't help with the flow, and that's why it's kind of helpful to have another person to help make sure that you do have a flow in this continuity in your document. That could make a big difference too in your presentation, because that's all you have when you first are presenting yourself before an employer. And that you look like you're about to
Yeah,
bust out of your.
I'm biting the bit here. I just want to get your take on this, because I always suggest, and I do it myself, is when you're done with something, put it down and walk away from it, and give yourself at least a few hours overnight if you can, and then go back and look at it again. Because you know, the more you sit there, you know, it's so much better to look at it, and you see things that you wouldn't have.
Yeah, I do that. And I do that a lot, probably. I put it down, but very often I'm working on 3 or 4 different projects at the same time, like you. They're not resumes, they're stories, there's commentary that's involved. And you know, when you write for yourself, in some ways, you have some artistic, you know, there's artistic freedom. When you're doing it for somebody else, you want to get it right because they're paying you lots of money to do it. So you got this one time. So you better submit it at its best, as opposed to at its midpoint. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle with, is that they don't really do it to their best. At the same time too, there's the overthinking aspect, and sometimes it helps to have another person to help you with that. Damian, do you get caught up in that, and do you get past that?
Yeah, usually, but like Annette said, you know, I put it down and give it a day or so to age, and then come back and look at it. And sometimes it's looking at it through a new set of eyes, and I'll end up doing a massive rework before I send it for somebody else to edit it. And you're right. I mean, when you write, when you communicate, whether it's an email or a letter or an article, that says a lot about you. And you don't want to put yourself in a position where you are embarrassed. Just one quick example. I was working with someone, and it was a letter of recommendation, for lack of a better word. I spent 15 man hours on it, got it all done, patted myself on the back, sent it in, and then showed it to the person that usually proofs it. And she did a Google search, and she said, I don't see a judge name as you put in your letter. And here I had spent all this time, and the one thing that I didn't do was spell check the name of the judge.
Mhm.
And if I were the person that was reading that letter of recommendation and I saw that my name was misspelled, I would have just tossed it aside. So
Well, and I think you hit on a really big point, is that the accuracy of the information that people put needs to be accurate, and it needs to be in with the right spelling, and spelling names is also pretty important, especially in this environment, since we have all the access to find out what people's actual names are, especially as they write it on their own LinkedIn profiles. But I think also that people also need to consider checking their timelines, and also to make sure that they have that, the place of employment they reference, if it doesn't exist, that there needs to be, you may not need to compensate it right on the resume, but there needs to be some plausibility as well, because people tend to try to overcompensate for the lack of information that they have, where it may matter to the employer that you worked at X, Y, and Z at a particular time, because they might have been too. And I know that older people tend to have a hard time remembering the exact dates of where they work, but I think that also deserves some thoughtful implementation while writing the resume too. And that maybe you could talk about why that may matter a little bit, or whether it doesn't matter as much that they have that information right.
No, I think it's critical to have that information right. And if the company is no longer in existence, you can certainly note that on your resume. If a company was been acquired since you worked there, you can put those both on there. It just depends on whether you have the current name first and then formally known as
Mhm.
next to it. I think that's important. That can happen with education too. Sometimes colleges have a different name. They've changed names or something. So I would agree with that. And I just like to mention something that Damian said earlier about putting some information about the company. I do that too under each company, just a couple of one or two very short lines about the company,
Mhm.
because I think it helps give the employer some context. Because
yes.
if you're working for Diageo or something, okay, everybody knows Diageo, but you know, I- I've worked with clients who are working for companies, they're, international companies with offices all over the world, but nobody would know their name. So I think that helps just to, as I said, give context to those companies.
Yeah, I like that idea. I like seeing having the idea that especially now, where people can actually, they could work from Chicago and work for a company in Italy, and it really does help to know, if it's a past company, you should have the spelling right, even if it's a foreign name, and also understand and give context where some of the terminology may matter and may change from a foreign to American. Thoughts on that, Damien?
I agree, and I don't know if the Social Security Department is doing this anymore. I sense they would, but if you contact Social Security, they should be able to give you the date the year that you started and the year that you ended, because that company had to pay income tax, and
Yes.
that is the most accurate way to determine what your years were for each company on your resume. And you're right. I mean, the older you get, the farther the exact day, month, year that you worked for a particular company, it has a tendency to fade. But once you get that information from Social Security, then you're golden, because you have the information that you need to accurately begin your resume.
And Damien, you should put that in a LinkedIn update because that was brilliant. I
Yeah.
did not know that. Annette, did you know that?
No, I had no idea. I had no idea.
My mind is blown. You may have saved some lives here, Dave. So Social Security can, and that makes sense because you do get something every year in the mail for the most part, saying, updating you what your Social Security number looks like if you should retire at that particular date. Of course, we're not talking about all the financial aspects of it, but yes, they would. They would, and I don't know. It's interesting that Social Security can get it right and the credit bureaus can get it all wrong, but that's a whole nother conversation. Uh, so yes, the Social Security, that's a great thing. Put that up for today, Damian, that's today, because a lot of older workers are will need that information. So we have, wow, we went an hour and 20 minutes plus on this particular conversation. And so we provide the people robust perspective, not only just on their resume, but also just for the careers, because I think we picked out some pretty sound strategies that they can implement that will probably be relevant for them for the next few years, so that people can refer back to it and get a whole lot out of it. Any last words, either one of you? Start with Damian, then I'll let Annette end it.
Well, just one, Annette, thank you for being here today.
Yes, yes.
Really, really great information.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark, as always, thank you for the opportunity. It's always exciting when we start on Friday,
Yes,
because we really get a chance to talk about a breadth of things and respond to our listeners and viewers on the spot as they need the advice. We can give it to them now without delay. And I think that that's our greatest service. So thank you.
Yeah. Sure. Annette, anything you want to leave the people with?
I'd just like to say thank you so much for the opportunity. As you know, I listen to you guys from time to time, and I, always hear such great information. And, it's an honor to be here with you. So I thank you for that.
Yes. Well, Annette, thank you. It was an honor to be with you. Glad we made the right choice, because there's so many people who could have done as well as you, but you had all those letters behind more than anybody else. So I said, yeah, I think we got to go. And then we know too that you also frequent the show, and that's how you get on, is by watching and being a fan of the show, especially when you have expertise to lend. So we definitely needed to have, it was your comments that inspired the show actually from last week. So we said we gotta have a resume show. That's why I think you left by that time to go to your clubhouse at that moment. But I said at the end, I said, yeah, you got an invitation coming up. So in any case, the Modern Job Search Checklist show is every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 o'clock Central. We answer all the questions. We're also open for suggestions for things to talk about. And they don't have to be in alignment and a theme. We can answer random questions. We could talk everything from interviewing to hiring, to the ATS, to resume, though I think we're going to rest the resume talk for a little while here, because Annette covered so much that Damian and I could probably have thought of, but we tried to cover so much in the show. We thank you very much for watching. Leave a comment. You could continue to ask questions on the thread even after we sign off here. A big shout out for next Wednesday's show. I have JobVite coming on the show to talk about the annual 2021 Job Seeker Nation report, which we're going to get really geeky with the numbers and percentage, and it's very interesting. You could follow my thread to find out where that report is, and particularly on Twitter, I think I shared it. I don't remember if I shared it this week on LinkedIn, but nevertheless, thank you very much for joining us. You all have a good day. Annette, Damian, thank you very much. And you all have a good day as well. We're signing off.
Thank you.
Thank you.